Welcome back to the deep dive. Whether you are prepping for a big meeting, catching up on the latest structural theories, or you're just, insanely curious about how the world actually operates behind closed doors, you are in the exact right place today.
Yeah, you really are, because today we're focusing on something that affects every single one of us, every single day, whether we realize it or not: power. And we have this incredibly dense, cutting-edge academic dossier from 2026 to guide our analysis. It's titled Architekturen der Macht, or Architectures of Power.
And it is a truly remarkable document. The authors take this really wide multidisciplinary approach.
Oh, absolutely. They are looking at everything from classical strategy to organizational psychology, all the way up to algorithmic governance and global data structures. It's comprehensive.
Right. And our mission today is to give you a shortcut to understanding these hidden mechanics. We want to take you on a journey from the ruthless court politics of the Renaissance all the way to the algorithmic data empires of 2026. Because the goal here is to help you navigate your own career and your own life so that you don't end up as a mere statistical data point in someone else's system. Okay, let's unpack this.
To understand where the research takes us, the dossier notes that we first have to ground ourselves in the classical foundation of how human beings maneuver for influence. So the document anchors its initial analysis in Robert Greene's famous framework, the 48 Laws of Power.
Which is fascinating because the foundational premise the authors highlight here is that the drive for power is a universal human constant, but openly showing that you want power.
Yeah, that is completely taboo in civilized society.
Exactly. I mean, if you walk into your office tomorrow and declare you want to conquer the department, you will be ostracized immediately.
Right, and we live in this fascinating paradox. The dossier points out that fairness, decency, and democratic values often function as a necessary societal facade. Meanwhile, beneath the surface, the actual power struggles happening in your modern office are running on the exact same ruthless rules as the courts of the Renaissance.
I know many of you listening already follow the classic strategies, so we won't dwell on the basics for too long, but let's look at the psychology of the courtier and Law 1, never outshine the master.
If you are in a hierarchical structure, the document states this is traditionally the baseline for survival, because power is historically a zero-sum game.
The ego of the master, or your boss, is the sun, and everyone else has to orbit them. If a subordinate shows too much talent or brilliance, the research indicates it doesn't result in a promotion.
No, it triggers intense fear and insecurity in the superior. And what is really fascinating here is the core philosophy underlying these older laws. The text explicitly analyzes the concept that honesty is a blunt weapon.
A blunt weapon, because if you are fearlessly open, you become predictable.
Exactly. You lose that aura of mystery that is historically essential for generating respect and fear, which are the two pillars of classical power. Indirection and manipulation are highly prized.
It's all about the power of silence and illusion. The document lists several key classical strategies to achieve this, like Law 3, which is about concealing your intentions to throw up smokescreens.
And Law 4, always say less than necessary.
Right, the idea that short, vague answers force the other person to fill the awkward silence. It extracts information from them while building your own imposing aura. Then there's Law 5, guarding your reputation, and Law 7, getting others to do the work, but making sure you take the credit.
But I think it's important to mention that the authors don't just present these rules as gospel. Far from it. The critical analysis within the source argues that this soap opera philosophy vastly oversimplifies human behavior.
Critics in the text point out that operating like a 16th century courtier completely ignores the structural value of positive traits, things like cooperation and empathy.
Yes, and more importantly, the document outlines the psychological toll this takes. Living this way, constantly manipulating, viewing every colleague as a chess piece, and hiding your true self, it ultimately leads to severe psychological stress.
The research shows it forces the breakdown of real, authentic human connections.
Connections which are actually vital for long-term resilience. That psychological toll is a perfect bridge to the clinical side of the research. When that authentic connection breaks down, what is left? The dossier moves into the clinical psychology of power, focusing on a framework called the dark triad.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we are moving beyond historical anecdotes and into hard data. The dark triad consists of 3 personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy.
And the document uses this construct to explain antisocial behaviors that surprisingly often accelerate a person's career. But the 2024 data on the need for power, what the researchers call end power, reveal some incredibly nuanced findings about who actually wants to sit on the throne.
Let's break down that 2024 study. If we start with narcissists, the data shows a strong positive correlation with the need for power. They actively seek out leadership positions because it feeds their fundamental requirement for admiration, dominance, and a feeling of uniqueness.
But the Machiavellians, this is completely counterintuitive. You would think a classic Machiavellian would want the CEO title. But the 2024 data shows a surprisingly negative correlation to wanting power for its own sake.
They actively avoid the spotlight.
It makes sense when you look at the functional utility of power. The data suggests Machiavellians prefer to operate in the background. Being the outright leader carries too much risk, too much exposure, and too much accountability.
They would rather minimize personal risk while achieving their goals through calculation and manipulation from the shadows. They want to control the king, not be the king.
Exactly. And then there are the psychopaths. According to the study, their traits have an insignificant effect on long-term power motivation. They're driven more by impulsivity and the thrill of risk rather than the structured, patient building of a stable power base.
But the researchers don't just look at these traits in isolation. Right?
No, the most groundbreaking research from 2024 and 2025 detailed in the dossier involves what happens when these dark triad individuals team up within an organization. The authors call it collective dark leadership.
And this coalition leads to the creation of an organizational phenomenon known as the ethics mirage. If you are listening to this and your company just announced a massive, flashy integrity charter or a new corporate social responsibility initiative while secretly cutting your benefits or institutionalizing brutal workloads, you might be looking at an ethics mirage right now.
The document refers to this dynamic as ethical fading. A coalition of dark triad leaders build a loud, performative facade of morality. The discrepancy between this ethical appearance and the ruthless reality becomes so deeply embedded in the organization's DNA that employees begin to mistake unethical behavior for normal professional competence.
The dossier details 3 specific mechanisms for how this mirage is maintained. I was reading the section on the first mechanism, accountability shielding. It sounds like leadership deliberately makes the organizational chart confusing, diffusing power, so nobody can be blamed when things go wrong. Is that the right way to read the data?
That is precisely what the research outlines. They create intentional ambiguity to block external control and suppress dissent. Then the second mechanism is toxic role modeling.
Right. This is the systemic moral drift that happens when employees lower down the hierarchy, observe and mirror the dark behaviors of the leadership coalition just to survive in the culture.
Yes. And finally, there is shadow projection. The document describes this as the dark inner selves of the leaders being unconsciously absorbed by the entire organization. It results in the complete loss of psychological safety and the institutionalization of corruption, all while the company website praises its own ethical standards.
So you have these incredibly toxic, highly centralized power structures successfully hiding behind a shiny ethical facade. You might be thinking, don't modern decentralized flat structures fix this? What about DAOs and all these new organizational models that promise to eliminate the boss entirely?
The authors dive deep into that exact question, looking specifically at decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, relying on stark data from 2025. The core promise of a DAO is democratic participation and a flattened hierarchy, but the reality recorded in the data. The average voter turnout in these organizations is a dismal 6.3%.
And the numbers paint an even starker picture when you look at who actually holds the power. The research indicates that the top 10% of token holders control, on average, 76.2% of the total voting power.
To measure this systemic power concentration, the researchers use a metric called the Nakamoto coefficient.
If I am understanding the text correctly, that coefficient is basically asking how many independent entities need to collude to completely compromise or control the system. And the answer in these DAOs is shockingly few.
Exactly. What this metric proves is that DAOs, instead of democratizing power, often shift into technocratic plutocracies. It becomes a system where financial resources directly buy political decision-making power.
The illusion of decentralization is essentially identified by the authors as just another architecture of power, designed to pacify the majority while the few maintain control. So if restructuring the company into a DAO doesn't democratize power, what about changing where we work?
Let's look at the remote work shift, because the dossier makes it clear that digital and remote work models have absolutely shattered some of those classic Machiavellian tactics we discussed earlier.
The transition to remote work breaks the physical mechanics of control. Take Law 17, for example, which is about keeping people in a state of suspended terror or cultivated unpredictability.
The 2025 and 2026 research shows this completely fails in a virtual environment. You cannot effectively loom over someone, micromanage the desk space, or assert physical dominance when you are just a square on a screen and they are sitting comfortably in their own living room.
The physical presence and immediate surveillance are gone. The document outlines that in these digital spaces, old school Machiavellianism just leads to severe emotional exhaustion and high employee turnover.
Instead, what the 2026 data shows actually works now are pull approaches. Servant leadership, built on trust, psychological safety, and cultural intelligence, is proving far more effective. You can't force people to follow you remotely. You have to create an emotional value that makes them want to pull in your direction.
It is a complete inversion of the old power dynamics.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the shift from physical to digital control within the office is just a microcosm of what is happening globally. As we look at the period from 2026 to 2040, the research details a monumental shift. Power is moving away from the individual entirely and toward the algorithm.
This brings us to a fascinating concept in the dossier, originally theorized by Yanis Varoufakis' techno-feudalism. The authors argue this is a complete paradigm shift. The premise is that you are no longer a free consumer interacting in a digital marketplace. You are a digital peasant working on the land owned by platform lords.
And these digital lords aren't harvesting wheat or corn. They are harvesting something the text calls loosh.
Think of loosh as the digital calories you burn every time you scroll, click, or linger on a video. It is the attention energy and the behavioral data of the users, which these platforms harvest to feed their algorithms.
Power is now secured by building data moats. If a platform owns exclusive proprietary insights into user behavior and holds the underlying models, they dictate the rules of the market. They become the ultimate architects of influence because they increasingly dictate societal reality itself.
And the research asks, how much of that reality is even human anymore? The sources highlight the dead internet theory, which is the idea that over 50% of all internet traffic is already just bots communicating with other bots.
The authors view this as a massive erosion of actual human influence within these global power architectures, and that erosion extends directly into how societies are governed. By 2026, the document notes we're entering an era of algorithmic governance.
Governments are moving beyond reactive AI use and are proactively utilizing it for budgeting, city planning, and crisis detection. They are relying on real-time data streams and digital twins of cities to make resource allocations.
But the text points out the massive risk here, the loss of accountability. Instead of elected officials publicly debating policy, vital civic decisions are being made by opaque algorithmic black boxes.
The research warns of a rising techno-authoritarianism, where power quietly transfers from democratic representatives to technocrats and the private platform owners who supply the code.
And the way influence operates in this space is deeply insidious. The dossier details AI poisoning. This is where propaganda campaigns are explicitly designed to manipulate the training data of AI models.
That is terrifying when you think about it. The goal isn't just to win an argument online. The goal is to artificially manufacture societal consensus from the ground up. Power becomes an invisible architecture that steers the thoughts and actions of billions of people.
And those people have absolutely no way of recognizing the origin of the impulse because the AI presents it as objective fact. This invisible architecture is precisely why the geopolitical landscape has shifted so dramatically in the document's analysis.
The rivalry between the U.S. and China in 2026 is no longer primarily about physical territory. It is a structural war over the technology stack, the digital standards, the digital currencies, and the semiconductor supply chains.
The sheer scale of this is staggering. The research projects that U.S. cloud providers alone will invest $600 billion into AI infrastructure in the year 2026 alone. That is a massive consolidation of resources.
Because of this, nations around the world are racing to develop sovereign AI to ensure their own national security and economic independence. They recognize that if they rely on another nation's tech stack, they have ceded their sovereignty.
Exactly. The geopolitical stakes are higher than ever.
So what does this all mean? We have covered everything from toxic office managers to global algorithmic governance. How do you, the listener, actually apply this knowledge to your own career in 2026 without becoming just another data point? Well, the dossier provides an updated playbook.
The authors note that because the world is now highly mobile, digital, and reputation-based, coercive strategies are losing their value. Prestige power is the new currency. The researchers have taken Green's classic 48 laws and updated them for this new reality.
Let's look at the new rules, starting with Old Law 1, which was never outshine the master. The 2026 update replaces this with leapfrogging.
Right. Think about a modern career trajectory. Blind loyalty to an average boss will actively halt your rise today. The strategy the author suggests is to learn everything you possibly can from your current position, master the systems, and then switch teams or switch companies. You outshine the master by simply leaving their orbit entirely.
Then there is Old Law 4, which used to be always say less than necessary. The new rule is build a personal brand. The reasoning here is structural. We live in a world drowning in digital noise.
In this environment, silence doesn't make you look mysterious. It just means you are ignored by the algorithm. Silence only works if you already have massive, established institutional power.
For everyone else, visibility equals status. If you aren't actively shaping your narrative online, someone else will, or you simply won't exist in the professional landscape. Moving to Old Law 7, take the credit for others' work.
The modernized strategy is the complete opposite. Lead with honor. The data on remote work we discussed earlier explains why. Today, top talent is incredibly mobile. They vote with their feet.
If you are a manager and you steal the credit for a brilliant slide deck your subordinate made, they won't plot revenge in the shadows. They will just log off, update their profile, and take another remote job by Friday.
You will lose your most valuable resources. The text emphasizes you have to give talent the recognition they deserve to bind them to you long term. The dossier also provides a fascinating update to Old Law 13, which was appeal to people's self-interest.
The new rule for 2026 is appeal to higher ideals. We live in saturated, highly developed societies where people are desperately searching for meaning. Using pro-social framing and virtue signaling are incredibly powerful currencies right now.
If you want to motivate a team or launch a product, pitching it as a way to make money isn't enough. You have to frame it as a mission for self-actualization or societal improvement. That is how you capture that loosh or attention energy we talked about earlier.
And finally, Old Law 46, never appear perfect, which was originally designed to avoid generating envy among your peers. The new rule flips that completely appear as perfect as possible.
The logic here ties back to mobility. In a highly fluid, fast-paced world, you don't need to worry about the envy of the people around you because if you are moving up quickly through leapfrogging, you are going to leave them behind anyway.
The text suggests you should project peak competence and surround yourself only with other winners who are operating at your velocity. It is a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. The successful power player in 2026 is no longer a lone wolf plotting in the shadows of a Renaissance court. To survive, you have to be an architect of influence systems.
You need to understand how algorithmic bias works, how data moats are constructed, and how to navigate these collective ethics illusions in the modern office.
The document concludes with a vital call to action for all of us. As society moves deeper into algorithmic governance and techno-feudalism, individual autonomy is at severe risk of being completely eroded in the name of systemic efficiency.
Society's ultimate challenge, according to the authors, is to demand transparency and accountability in systems that are intentionally designed for indirection and opacity.
You must remain vigilant to maintain your autonomy. And this raises an important question, a chilling detail from the geopolitical section of the dossier that we haven't touched on yet.
Which detail is that?
The research outlines the current integration of AI into nuclear command structures.
That is a staggering escalation from city planning algorithms.
It is. The dossier notes that some strategic analysts argue AI increases the risk of escalation by shortening decision times to milliseconds, while others hope it brings increased caution by removing human panic. But the text introduces a concept called the AI trust gap.
The AI trust gap. What exactly does the data say that means?
This is the terrifying difference between how effective an AI system actually is versus how effective human leaders perceive it to be.
So, human leaders might trust an algorithm with civilization-ending weapons more than they scientifically should, or they might misunderstand its calculations entirely because it is operating in a black box.
Precisely. And if global stability relies on algorithms plagued by this trust gap, we have to ask ourselves who or what is really holding the power? Is it the leader pushing the button, or the invisible code deciding what options are even presented to that leader?
That is a profound and frankly terrifying thought to leave on. Power isn't just about who sits at the head of the boardroom table anymore. It is about the invisible code shaping the reality of the room itself. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take these 2026 playbook rules, apply them to your own life, and keep questioning the invisible architectures around you. We will catch you next time.